Episode 146 of Australia's #1 marketing show. Listen in to this fireside chat I have with a fellow who built an internationally famous hotel from scratch in less than 2 years with, wait for it, no previous hotel experience.
Welcome to the Small Business Big Marketing Show, where successful small business owners share their secrets to take your marketing to the next level. Now here's your host, Tim Reid.
G'day everyone and welcome back to the Small Business Big Marketing Show, Australia's favourite small business marketing show. I am your host, Timbo Reid, but you right there, so much more importantly, are a small business owner wanting to crank out some very, very good marketing in order to grow that baby of yours. And that's what we are here to do. That's the only reason this show exists. And we are brought to you by the very good folk at Net Registry who contribute to that cause of growing your business. They help you get your online marketing sorted. And in fact, a couple of things in regards to Net Registry. One is freebies. Hello, we love a freebie. There is a Victorian government event happening on August the 29th in Melbourne, and you are invited. You are absolutely invited. Net Registry are a sponsor of that event. It's called the Small Business Big Marketing Event, not to be confused with this, the Small Business Big Marketing Show. But I am going to go and have a look at and have a listen to the speakers, and I would love to see you there. I've got 20 tickets to give away, and if you are registered on my email list at smallbusinessbigmarketing.com, you will be the first to know about it. So stay tuned for that. That's on August the 29th, 2013. It's in Melbourne. It's a half-day event, and I'm going to tag a meetup on the back end of that. We'll catch up for lunch. Anyone in Melbourne who wants to have a bit of a catch up with me and the other listeners of the show, then I would love to see you there. As I said, register at smallbusinessbigmarketing.com. Then you're on my list, and then we can talk turkey. Net Registry are sponsors of that. They're sponsors of this show. They make things happen. They make things happen with your online marketing. So head over to netregistry.com.au and check them out. Big welcome to everyone from the Flying Solo community as well. All right, guys, big show today. I just hung up from my guest, Richard Crawford, who was the founder and owner for a period of time of a wonderful hotel, very famous hotel in Australia called the Henry Jones Hotel down in Hobart in Tasmania. So Richard's here to share how he built an internationally famous hotel with no experience in a couple of years. It's a riveting story and it's an inspiring story. And I want to share some learnings with you at the back end of that interview. Before I do that, just been kind of mulling over this whole concept of success recently, right? And in fact, to that end, I came across a wonderful quote, or was reminded of a wonderful quote. The quote goes like this: "Success in life is knowing the difference between ham and eggs. The chicken's involved, the pig is committed." I love that quote. I remember hearing it years ago and put a smile on my dial, and just been reflecting a bit on success lately and how to achieve it and maintain it and all that type of stuff. And I hope you have too. I mean, part of the reason I put this show together is for you to be successful. So I think we should all reflect on how successful we are being of late. What can we do to improve it? And I got to say, the word is committed. For me, the word is committed. Whenever I commit to something full on, full tilt, when I lean into it, it generally results in success in some form or another. And when I don't, when I flitter around the edges, it tends to not be successful because I'm not committed. And I love this concept. I think I've spoken about it before of leaning into whatever you do. And when you do that, it's like a surfing or a skateboard term. You know, when you lean into a corner, you are committed, and you're not pulling out of it. You are there in order to see it through. And I think any small business owner that I've spoken to, and I've spoken to this is the 146th episode of Small Business Big Marketing. So I've spoken to a few successful small business owners in my time, and every single one of them has been committed. They've been committed to building, from an idea, a dream to an idea to bringing it to market and making it happen. They've all been committed. None of them have gone, oh yeah, look, I got around to it in between doing some other stuff. Brian Singer from Rip Curl didn't go, oh yeah, I was just, I was doing other things as well as, making wetsuits and trying to build a global surf brand. He was committed. Jeff Harris from Flight Centre was committed. Every single Tom O'Toole from the Beechworth Bakery committed to making the ultimate, cake and pastry. They all lived it and breathed it. And so, the chicken's involved, but the pig is committed. And I think we've all got to be pigs. Okay, that's the learning for today. Continue to think about what constitutes success for you. It's not all about money. It's obviously about doing something you love and something that you're good at and something that makes a difference in the world and getting paid well along the way. And I think those two can absolutely live alongside each other. So that leads me into Richard Crawford, because Richard was absolutely committed to building an amazing brand, an amazing hotel down in Hobart in Tasmania. Now, Richard absolutely leaned into this idea. And just so you understand first of all, go and visit the website for the hotel that Richard started. The website is thehenryjones.com. You can go and have a look at it and you'll get a sense of this beautiful boutique hotel located on the water in Hobart, which is a small state of Australia for overseas listeners, and it's the most beautiful place. In fact, just reflecting, my last week's guest was also from Hobart, Charles. In fact, Charles introduced me to Richard. Must be a Hobart thing going on. In fact, you won't believe this. My wife and daughter and one of my sons is down there as well at the moment on a sailing kind of expedition. So goodness me, there's a Hobart flavour to this show at the moment. Have a look at the Henry Jones. It is beautiful. It's an amazingly old building. It's an art hotel. Richard is responsible for making it that way. As he said at the start of the interview, it was occupied by squatters who were potentially going to set fire to the place if someone didn't do something about it. So it's an inspiring story. Honestly, grab a pen and paper, guys, because there is a lot of marketing gold about to drip through your headphones or your speakers, I promise. I'll see you on the other side because I'm going to share some of my key learnings that I've taken from Richard's sharing. For now, enjoy Richard Crawford, owner, founder of the Henry Jones Hotel. Richard Crawford, welcome to Small Business Big Marketing.
Hi, Tim.
Now, Richard, the Henry Jones Hotel, A, what a wonderful brand. B, what a wonderful hotel. It's a pub that I've been wanting to stay at for a long time, and it's great to be able to speak to the founder of it.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure to be involved in what you're doing, Tim, and I understand that the target audience is hopefully interested in what we've got to say. We'll see how we go.
I have no doubt, Richard. So now I just find this fascinating. You built an international hotel from scratch in less than 2 years with no previous hotel experience. So, that's very, very interesting. Where did the idea come from for doing this?
Well, we'd been in the tourism caper in Tasmania our family had for sort of 20 years, and I'd had 10 years experience in different components of the industry, car rental and travel agencies, etc. And a colleague of mine who'd had a couple of smaller hotels rang me and said, look, there's an opportunity on Hobart's waterfront. It's a tender opportunity. There's a bunch of old warehouses. They date back to the 1820s, in fact, making them some of the oldest buildings in Australia. And it was the old IXL jam factory, which had been abandoned 30 years before. And there were squatters living in the buildings, and state government, in their wisdom, decided that they should be developed, otherwise the squatters were going to burn these beautiful buildings down. And so we put our hats in the ring, and there were 28 tenders, all the usual suspects, all the international hotel brands, but we were two locals who decided we'd have a go at the process.
So, 28 tenders. You'd been in tourism, but no hotel experience. Your business partner did have hotel experience?
Yeah, look, and she had a really good eye for a quality proposition. Her partner, now I don't like to talk about age, but Flora was sort of in her 60s and I was in my late 20s, so we made an interesting sort of duo. But her husband had been in property development in a big scale, so I think she'd learned a bit from him. But Flora De Kantzow is her name. She had really good eye for a quality property. Yep. And then we got talking, and her scale of previous investments had been kind of 8 to 15, 20 rooms, that type of thing. The Henry Jones, the opportunity was to go a lot bigger than that, but we put our heads together and decided that 50 rooms in the warehouse buildings would be a really good fit because it would suit that boutique hotel market, but still give us the scale that we needed to make a quid. So we put our heads together and we had to be creative, put it that way, to beat the big boys.
Tell me, I want to explore that, but just want to go back to that sort of phone call or that meeting where You and Flora have come together, and you're a 20-something-year-old bloke who's got no hotel experience, and you've all of a sudden gone, no, I'm gonna have a real crack here. I mean, that's a big decision because I imagine there'd be some significant investment, both time and money, required to get it to what it became. How did that feel? Like, tell me about that moment where you've gone, no, I'm going to do this.
Well, look, it was sort of a bit of a gradual process because the first phone call from Flora was really to seek advice from me because through my wholesale travel company, I'd been giving her little businesses a fair bit of support and a fair bit of revenue. And Flora said, there's a meeting on tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in Launceston. I want you to come and give me a hand. Now, Flora's very creative, but not as good around the board table as perhaps, I'd had a bit more experience in that regard. So I jumped in the car.
What do you mean? Was she abrupt or just couldn't read the play? Or
No, just not as experienced, in the commercial world. So I jumped in the car, headed to Launceston, and 8 o'clock, had no idea what I was walking into. And the plans were laid out on the boardroom table. I looked at them and thought, wow, this is an amazing site. It's funny, it's one of those sites that had been in Hobart forever and a day. It was part of the landscape, but you kind of wandered along and didn't really pay it much attention because Salamanca Place was at one end of the cove, which is the celebrated tourism precinct, but Hunter Street was the other bookend that nobody went to. So when I saw the drawings in a way that I'd never really viewed the buildings, I thought this is a good concept. My job at the meeting was to make Flora look good.
This meeting, can I just get, is this a meeting with the government to present the tender opportunity, or is this Flora presenting an idea where she wanted to submit a tender?
This was effectively the building/development company that had really been given the site because it was in such disrepair by the state government. They paid, I think, maybe $200,000 for the site. Yeah, which was the reason for that was because there was unknown contamination levels at the site, and it was a bit of a risk for them. They took it on, and the idea was then, as the master developer, they would carve it up into retail, hotel. The big anchor operator would be the hotel. So they were keen to find a hotel operator to take that bit off their hands once it was built. So the plans were put out by the developer/builder, and I really just talked about Flora's expertise in hotelling. We made a pretty good fist of it, I thought. I got in the car and drove back, and Flora rang me. I was halfway back to Hobart, it's a 2-hour drive, and she said, I'm going to have a go at this, but I want you to be involved. So I said, all right, let's have a meeting tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock in Hobart, and made her do the reverse trip. But we quickly put our heads together, came up with a plan, and within, I think, probably 2 months, had a submission on the table amongst those the other names like Intercontinental and Seville and Savoy, and our idea was for it to be an art hotel, the first art hotel in Australia. Was it really?
So because there's been a few since then, and that was your 28 tenders amongst global brand names, Intercontinental. Why would they? Besides it being a good idea, they had to trust you as well. Like, how'd you get that across?
Look, I think there were a few pillars to our submission that really stood out from the crowd without knowing, but we got some advice. It's always good to go and get some expert advice from trusted advisors, and the local guys at Deloitte in Tasmania, the first thing they said to us was make sure you've got the biggest proposal on the table.
Like size-wise?
Yeah. So,
the old weight test.
A4 became, A1. And we had the big pictures. We needed to show them that whilst we were the smaller guys and we didn't have the deep pockets, we knew the other guys would treat this as a race to who would pay the most for the finished product, right? So in other words, I'm guessing, but Intercontinental might have said, we'll give you $15 million for a finished hotel to the builder. Now, we didn't have that sort of money, so we had to be creative in two ways. One, in the way the deal was structured, but two, in what we wanted to create. And I think we won probably on both counts because we suggested to the builder, you guys should retain ownership of this. And what we'll do, we'll pay you $1 million a year rent for 50 years. Now, that sounded brilliant to them because they got an anchor tenant, good return on their building investment, but also longevity. But, of course, that suited us because a 50-year lease is effectively freehold. So we paid $0 instead of paying $15 million, but we guaranteed them a rent of $1 million a year.
So let me just understand that because, so builder, here's $1 million a year. That's yours. You own the property. Builder retains ownership of the property, the real estate.
Correct.
And you, therefore, your aim is to build a business that you can at some point sell and make your dough. Is that right?
That's right. And you can only do that if you've got a long-term tenure. So 50 years was, what we sought. Mm-hmm. But that effectively, in our view, was freehold. But, of course, we had the option to buy. So once we were travelling well and had some money in the tin, mm-hmm. The idea then was that we would then pay after we got some runs on the board. So that kind of suited the developers because they felt good about the return on their investment, but also retaining ownership of this iconic site that might leverage other opportunities for them.
The builder's going, he's paid $200,000 for the site and he's got someone offering him $1 million a year for 50 years, like right there.
Yeah, but they've probably spent $12 million or something on the redevelopment.
Yeah.
Don't forget. So they've got a lot of remedial works to do. Turning these warehouses into 50 5-star suites was difficult, particularly with the heritage component of the building.
Oh, so they're copping the cost of the build.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right, okay.
So they copped that, and then the way that the deal that we structured was that we would have to, they'd give us painted walls and carpet, and then we'd have to put the TVs in, the beds, and that's when you go down to Harvey Norman and say we want 50 TVs, we want 50 king-size beds, and, you do good deals with your suppliers. So so all of a sudden, it was a manageable deal for two, to answer your question, it was a manageable deal for two people with, not the scope of funds of a multinational. Flora had some a pretty good super fund she wanted a return on. So, the paid up capital and the investment we made in the fit out, which was, probably $2.5 million to fit it out, was really the extent of our initial exposure, if you like.
Was there any point in that process, Richard, where you got the wobbles?
When I got the phone call to say we got the deal.
We've got to do that now.
That's it, because to be honest, I'd really enjoyed this challenge of pulling together a compelling bid, and that was backed by our understanding of the local market. And look, that was the other component that probably made us stand out from the other guys, is that we knew the local market. We were passionate Tasmanians. And I'll talk to you about sort of Henry in a moment, but Henry, who died, way back in 1926, he was a big part of it. And from our point of view, we gave the whole process personality, but we started to get pretty passionate about bringing Henry back to life. Then when we got the phone call to say, well, you've got the deal, you've got to go and find the money, and congratulations. I remember in my office just sitting there thinking, what do I do now?
I love that. I love a bit of business courage. Tell me, so let's talk product, the product side of it, and clearly Henry plays a role here, I'm assuming. But so I've heard you speak before about the fact that, understanding what the market wants is critical, and giving them what they want. So you're building a hotel, you're building an international hotel. So you talk about local market. Who are you building it for, and how did you decide what that product was going to contain?
Well, we're believe it or not, we're going back 10 years almost now at this process. And at that point in time, the mood of travellers was starting to change. This cookie-cutter approach of the Hiltons, the Hyatts, the Sheratons, people were starting to, corporates and leisure travellers, by the way, were starting to say, look, we want something different. We want to be surprised. We don't want to walk into a hotel room and know what we're going to get before we even walk in the door. And that was the starting point of our conversation internally. It was that let's do something that surprises the market. The brass and marble hotels, that I call them, had really taken over the world in terms of options, but we wanted to create something that was reflecting the true values of the destination. And what I mean by that is, you can go to exotic places around the world like Vienna or Venice or Paris, and often you're staying in a hotel that has no connection with.
You could be anywhere. I've come back from Dubai and Vietnam in the last 2 months and had a brilliant time, but in both cases stayed in hotels where I always think, you know what, I could be anywhere.
That's right. It's a cardboard box and it's a bed, and that's okay. But I bet your preference would have been to have a more authentic experience that was consistent with the place you're at.
Where you're at, yeah.
Now, And that was kind of starting to change. That I think the big brands had got a bit complacent 10 years ago, and this idea of boutique, niche, edgy, funky was starting to really come out in the needs of travellers. So we set about being an independent hotel. We were approached to be part of chains, and we resisted that temptation, and instead looked at four real, I think, pillars of strategy. One was art. One was history of the place. The third was design in architecture and fit out. And the fourth was Henry. And Henry Jones was a 12-year-old kid who'd become famous down the track after working for the first major jam maker in Australia. And he created his brand called IXL. Mm. And IXL was his life motto. I excel at all things I do was Henry's mantra, if you like. And Henry had created an empire in these buildings, and we decided that the hotel should bear his name. So the Henry Jones Art Hotel, as a trading gallery, was the result.
Wow, yeah, great to have those pillars. That's a great way of looking at it. You and everything that makes up that product then has to kind of fit into those pillars. Did you? Okay, so we've got the product now that's started to develop. It launches in 2004. Is that right? 2004?
Yeah, 2004 we opened.
Tell us about opening day. You opened the doors? You got forward bookings?
Yeah, we did. You know, one of the things, the beauty of when we opened, of course, was this phenomenon of online bookings that just started. Uh-huh. So the beauty of that was, we weren't sure when we'd open. You need to get your occupancy certificates and all that sort of stuff. We were putting beds together at 3 a.m, and I was there, and knowing that there's a fair chance tomorrow would be the day.
Love it.
But before that, go back a month, go back 3 months, you really don't know. Mm. So this trigger of when you start taking bookings is a bit of a moving feast. Mm-hmm. But the beauty of the internet was the instruction I gave to our general manager was, we're ready to go, dump all the rooms on whatif.com.au. Huh. And for the first 6 months, 30% of our business came from What If.
That's a discount site, isn't it?
It is. Now, I mean, at the time...
which doesn't feel in line. Clearly it worked, but it just doesn't feel in line with this brand, Henry Jones, that you've created, which is, premium, high-end hotel. And I'm booking it on What If.
Well, the brand journey, though, of course, was only a few months young.
Yes.
So we hadn't developed that sort of position in people's minds. What If enabled us to at least... There's two challenges in hotels. One is marketing and one is distribution. Now, distribution means if we're in Hobart and our travellers are elsewhere, how do we connect with them, particularly when the brand has never been known to anyone? Mm. It's not like we plugged into the Sheraton system and they just opened up another hotel and there were, 10 million people on their database that all of a sudden knew about it. Yeah. We had nothing like that.
Nothing. Did you have a database?
No, not in the traditional sense. I had a few mates I sent emails to and said, "Look, we're open next time you're in Hobart, come and stay with us." But the internet did enable us to have a distribution platform. Even back then, today it's more dynamic than then. Of course, I could put a bed in my office at 3:00 this afternoon, and I could fill it. By 6 p.m. Yeah. Because there'd be someone at Melbourne Airport on their smartphone trying to book a room, wherever that bed was.
Airbnb.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So look, we they were tense times because you're not holding a lot of forward bookings. You're hoping that things will happen when you open the doors. And we had a few from those internet channels, but by and large, it was just all systems go from a marketing point of view. PR was really what underpinned it.
I want to touch on that because that's critical and what you did with the journos and things. Before we go there, Richard, I just want to so with What If, it's a classic example of people need to see this place. You've invested so much time and money and ideas into the actual product that people need to see it in order for that word of mouth to generate. So I'm guessing What If allowed that to happen. People come in and then all of a sudden you got people coming through from day one, heading back home, ringing their friends, getting on, even back then, 10 years ago, Facebook, whatever it is, and saying, you got to see this place. Yeah, that's kind of what happened.
Look, it's a big part of it. When you're pitching yourself at a premium end of the market, we had a lot of wedding inquiries in the year leading up, but of course, the bride wanted to see the function room.
Yeah, good luck.
wanted to see the suites, and you don't blame them for doing that.
Yeah.
So whilst there was so much intense interest because it was such a high-profile site, there was still a lot of people that needed to be able to touch it, feel it, and understand it before they committed to, a group booking or a wedding or even contracted corporate rates. We couldn't knock on the door of, a big corporate account like BHP, not that was an example, but someone like that, and say, look, we want all your business whenever you travel to Hobart. The decision makers still wanted to be able to see the rooms. So we needed to crank the machine as quickly as possible from day one of opening.
All right, let's talk PR, because you had a significant PR initiative around it. What did you do?
Look, PR, in my view, is probably one of the most important components of marketing. One, because it's, I think, the best return on investment, and two, because you're getting third-party endorsements. Someone else is talking about you if you do it right. In the hotel game, you can do your pretty brochures and you can say that you're the best hotel in town with the best beds and the best view. But if you get other people staying with you and commenting on that, that are key influencers, they're decision makers, they're opinion leaders, it really cuts through. So what we did was went very hard on our visiting journalist program, and mainly through the State Tourism Authority, through Tourism Tasmania, who conducted, they would bring 300 journalists plus to Tasmania a year. It was one of the most aggressive marketing ploys that they undertook, and we plugged straight into that. A lot of hotels would give Tourism Tasmania a 50% discount or a 20% discount.
I'm guessing you gave them 100% discount.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. Where others go halfway, we went the full way. I just said, we'll take as many as we can get. They're there for free. We'll look after them well, which we did. Getaway was a good example of that. Katrina Roundtree came down. Instead of staying for one night, I insisted they stayed for 3.
Wow. Yeah, for overseas listeners, Getaway is the biggest travel at the time. Is the biggest travel show in Australia.
Yeah, it was incredible for us to get on national TV, and of course, this is all underpinned by the reality that we had no money. We didn't have a big marketing budget that others might invest with. We'd spend all our money on all the flash fittings. So PR was a case of give them a free room and see what happens.
Just to interrupt there, because the irony is 50% discount, 100% discount. It's not as if it's costing you. Wouldn't be costing you a lot to put them up. You're going to value it at rack rate. You're going to value it at whatever the hard costs of just putting them up and feeding them are.
Absolutely, and you look at the cost of sale of the food component and all of that. If you really want to get finicky about the numbers, and I said it, the return on investment is remarkable. The tangible example I'll give is every Friday night I used to do an art and history tour. I'd put a little note in guest rooms and say, invite them to join the director of the hotel to learn about the story of Henry and to have a look at our art. There were 300 pieces by the University of Tasmania graduates throughout the complex for sale. But the first thing I did on the tour was to ask people where they were from. It was my market research, 15 minutes. And I thought, I'll get 3 or 4 guests that might come and have a glass of champagne with me on a Friday night. Every single Friday we had 30, 35 people, from a 50-room hotel coming to have a drink. And when each one of them told me how they'd heard about the hotel, which was my first question, where are you from? How did you hear about us? So many had said, we saw you on Getaway within, the first few months. But a message that kept coming back to me was New York Times. I thought, New York Times? There's no way we've advertised New York Times. You could never afford it. The next day I got an email from a journalist that had stayed with us, and they'd slipped through the net. Normally I met every one of them and had a drink with them. But a journalist from the New York Times had put a half-page story of the Henry Jones. The media would have been valued at, 300,000 or some ridiculous number. And people were starting to visit us from that article.
Unreal.
Which was, and I've got it now framed on my wall.
Yeah.
As a reminder of, you can get you don't have to spend $300,000 in advertising to get a $300,000 ad.
No, that's that. Well, Getaway and the article in New York Times, both tipping points clearly for the Henry Jones brand. You missed the email. The email from the journo saying, "Hey, I've just written an article. Here's a link to it." Or
no, I made some inquiries because this message had come through a few times now.
Yep.
That'd seen us on the New York Times, and that's when I think via Tourism Tasmania I got the email saying, "Yeah, this article has been published," which I got a copy of. But it was actually not so much the article that was published. it had a long tail because it was living online.
Yeah. It was there forever. Probably still there.
It was still there. So these Americans who would religiously, at the time, New York Times were probably an early adopter of online marketing and presence. And so people were doing searches for Tasmania and through the New York Times, I think the only article coming up was the one about the Henry Jones.
I love it.
It was great.
Richard, by the way, listeners, I'm speaking to Richard Crawford, who founded and owned between 2004 and 2008 the Henry Jones Hotel in Hobart, Tasmania, which is just an absolute, A, beautiful part of the world, and B, a beautiful hotel. Richard, that whole PR thing, did you continue the journo program through Tourism Tasmania? Did you just continue that ongoing?
Yes, we did. After probably 12 months, I think we introduced a visiting journalist rate because the word got out.
Free holidays down at the Henry Jones.
That's right. But we did. It remained a really important part of what we did, and it just elevated the brand in a way that we could never have afforded to do on our own. And the clippings that we received daily, the email stories we saw being written, and you get a freelance journalist that makes their money out of selling articles. They were being distributed far and wide. When you're the new kid on the block, when you're the fresh, sort of shiny new product, there's a lot of interest, and you need to capitalise on that early because it will dry up, and it did dry up. But I think we probably got 2 years of what I would call free marketing campaign just through working the system.
Well, I wouldn't say free. What do you reckon the average cost of putting up a journo was?
Oh, look, you could probably, I don't know, $100, Tim. If you look, you clean the room, you feed them. So you take a punt on $100 any day. Yeah,
every day of the week. Did you do any other marketing? So you got your PR campaign, your visiting journo campaign. You've got word of mouth happening as a result of providing a great product. Were you advertising? Were you doing anything else?
Yeah, look, I guess there's two components that most small business people will think about with their branding, and that's brand awareness and then tactical. From a brand awareness point of view, that's the really expensive stuff. If you want to get out there and tell the world that the Henry Jones Art Hotel is a new brand and you should stay there, you're going to go broke pretty quickly if you try and tell everyone.
Oh, yeah.
So PR was probably the main strategy for the awareness, but the tactical stuff is where our hotel manager and our sort of expert in-house people put their minds to work, and that was doing things like dealing with travel agents and wholesalers and corporate accounts, conference groups, all that sort of thing. So that's the tactical stuff, which we did by not by placing ads, but by jumping on aeroplanes and going to visit these people. Mm-hmm. And I remember one particular example. Our general manager went to a breakfast that was all of the big high-flying CEOs, their PAs went to. Now, they booked their accommodation, of course. So our general manager is a good-looking rooster, goes along and does his song and dance routine to this group of PAs and said, look, we'd really love to be the hotel of choice when you book accommodation for your boss. As a consequence, James Packer was a regular guest of ours.
How good's that?
Now, James, Mr. Packer, as we called him when he was a customer, he'd come down to reception in his tracky dacks and talk to, because we had this relaxed atmosphere, and I coined the phrase, it was all about black tie service with a blue jeans attitude.
Yeah, love it.
And what we meant by that was, it's a 5-star experience, but we're not wankers. We keep it real. We employed people that weren't necessarily from, Swiss hotel schools, but they were ex-actors, school teachers, a whole bunch of people that just got it, and they were real. And as a result, Mr. Packer felt very relaxed there. I couldn't see him doing that at Crown or or at a Sheraton, but we just had this approach that I think relaxed people, and that's when the whole product delivery really started to gain momentum, that people knew us as being the guys that didn't have the attitude. And I was personally tired of going to hotels and not even being smiled at by the people at reception.
Oh, yeah. Don't get me started. Tell me, Richard, how do you get that attitude throughout the organisation? Because okay, you're one of the bosses there, and you know exactly the brand that you're trying to create, and some of your senior staff will. But do you have meetings where do you have some kind of induction program from a new staff member, or do you have regular meetings where you go, okay, this is the brand we're trying to create, this is the personality, let me tell you about this black tie service with blue jeans attitude kind of concept? How do you get that throughout the organisation?
Well, I mean, that's kind of the genie in the bottle, isn't it, for most people? And what we're talking about is culture, organisational culture, and how you want your product to be conveyed by your staff. You know, when you go to bed at night, what you want to achieve in life. But how do you transfer that? We were lucky because we were a new business. So culture, there was no pre-existing culture. I reckon, to answer your question, it actually started 3 months before we opened. We hired a little office, which became the war room. And in that office, we were recruiting staff, we were writing down menus, we'd put the executive chef on, he was designing a menu. We all had red T-shirts, red was our colour. Mm-hmm. So we gave people a sense of ownership 3 months out. We created it together, we rolled our sleeves up. There was probably a team of a dozen in pre-opening for 3 months. Candidates walked in the door, and instead of walking into a corporate environment, they saw activity. They saw samples of bedspreads. They saw art. They saw bits and pieces of things everywhere. Right. They walked in and they could sense there was a vibe. And it kind of started then. And then it became obvious that if their vibe didn't match what the small team had created, then they probably weren't going to be suited to the role. We had 400 applications for our first 40 jobs, which sounds like a lot, but at the time and in Tasmania, that's a lot of people.
Yes, it is.
We were an employer of choice before we even opened, which was kind of fun. But to answer your question, I think the culture started early. When you're in the hotel at 3 a.m. putting beds together, that creates even more of a sense of ownership.
Yeah.
And then when you open the doors and you enjoy the wins together, and you enjoy the fact that we were getting this, getting awards and getting positive feedback. Everyone enjoyed that success.
I remember talking to Martin Daly, who was the head of people at Virgin Blue many years ago when Virgin Blue came to Australia, and his employment advertising cost was pretty close to zero. He paid nothing because staff wanted to work for the Virgin brand, and it's the power of branding. And I'm guessing the industry in which the hotel industry is quite transient from a staff point of view, I'm guessing, but your staff retention as a result of building this strong brand would have been pretty high? Yeah,
it was. There's probably two main groups of people that work in the hotel industry. Some are seeing it as a stepping stone or a part-time job, either at uni or something like that. Then you've got your career hotel people. We attracted a lot of the career hotel people because they saw that in Hobart as possibly the pinnacle of where they might be. They wanted to be at the flashiest place and the newest place in town. So we got that, but we also got a lot of people that at that time were seeking new opportunities. Unemployment was pretty high at the time. So we were, I think, in hindsight, blessed that we got a whole bunch of people that weren't just hotel people. They'd come from interesting, intriguing backgrounds, and they were happy to learn. They had no preconceived opinions about what they did at the previous hotel where they worked. So we had malleable sort of personalities that were happy to take on the whole personality of Henry.
Richard, you had it you got out of it in 2008. So what happened? Did you end up buying it off the construction company and then selling it, or what happened?
Well, that was the plan. We probably exceeded our expectations, really, in honesty, from opening. We were 90% occupied pretty much the whole time. We got the highest rates in Hobart. I remember someone telling me, and I really respected their opinion, long-time hotelier, you'll never get $200 a night in Hobart. Well, we got that in the first 6 months. We were averaging that. And I think in hindsight, part of it was because no one had ever asked for 200.
Yep.
We'd never tested the market with quality. So we exceeded our expectations. All the KPIs were above where we thought they'd be. We won a lot of awards. We won, the best tourism development in Australia at the Australian Tourism Awards. which was, you don't set out to win awards, but it's so satisfying for the people that have been involved in it. I remember being at this black tie function on the Gold Coast, and the guy that got up before me was the only guy not in a dinner suit. He was wearing khaki shorts and a khaki T-shirt. Steve Irwin.
Love it.
He won the Minister's Award for outstanding contribution to tourism. Mm-hmm. And I said to my wife, our category's next. You'll have to get up after Steve Irwin. It'll be a hard act to follow.
Yeah.
Well, as it turned out, we did, and to win Best New Tourism Development put us on the map, and awards that starts that whole PR train again, mm-hmm. because the awarded product gets the attention. So we were happy with how things were going, and we eventually, the short story is a company in Tasmania called Federal Group, the largest private employer on the island. They own the 2 casinos. People know West Point Casino, probably first casino in Australia, which was started by Mr. Farrell 35 years ago, and they had the Launceston Casino. They had started to move out of, to add to their entertainment portfolio, a tourism portfolio. So that not only did they want the shiny casinos with gaming, but they wanted to invest in tourism. And they'd started a brand called Pure Tasmania, an award-winning brand, which Federal Group used as the vehicle to buy a number of properties at Cradle Mountain, at Freycinet on the east coast, at Strawn on the west coast.
And clearly in Hobart.
Yeah, there was a missing piece of the puzzle, that they needed an iconic Hobart destination, and they're very compelling buyers, the Federal Group. Mm-hmm. And, they approached us, it suited us. My heart said no, my accountant said yes.
Yeah.
And, we exited, but something I'm very proud of. And in fact, when I spoke to the staff when we were leaving, I said there'll be a lot of other things in my life, but there'll never be another Henry Jones. And for me, it was, you don't expect to fall in love with a business, and our family had been involved in, a number, but this was my baby. I did outside of the family business, and I found something I was good at and I enjoyed.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. I get it. They obviously had a checkbook, a rather large checkbook, and I remember talking to a mate of mine who owned pubs years ago, and Tui's were out on the buying the pub spree, and I said, because he loved his pub. I said, why'd you sell? He said they just kept on increasing the number, and I got to the point where I couldn't say no. I'm guessing that's what happened to you, but 4 years in, emotionally, I'm guessing that would have been like the money would have soothed things, but just tell us about that kind of the emotional kind of detachment.
Look, to be honest, it was difficult because particularly when you start something from nothing, and a lot of small business people, most in fact, have done that. They've taken something and turned it around, or they've had a dream that they've made come real. For me, I did feel a sense of loss, if you like, because hotels are very public sort of business, where the Prime Minister used to stay with us. Now, I'm not going to mix with the Prime Minister unless I own this hotel. I'm never going to meet that person. Celebrities, all this sort of thing. And people kind of validate you based on what you own or what you've done, which I don't like, I must add. Mm-hmm. But, we'd have a function and you'd be introduced as the owner of the hotel, and for some reason that would validate you and people would want to talk to you, or they would seemingly give you more respect. And that never sat comfortably with me.
It's called celebrity?
Yeah, well, no.
Well, it is. I mean, to a certain extent it is. I mean, there's levels of celebrity, but that's what it is. It's why it's called star. They're called stars because people are attracted. And
it's not meaningful because the minute that you don't have that, and you fall for it a little bit, because what you do often defines you, right? What I did defined me. That's what I did every day. And then when you haven't got that, the definition of you perhaps is something you question.
Mm-hmm. So were there tears?
Yeah, I did actually. Yeah, when I addressed the staff. Yeah, just a little one. A little one. Because it was actually more pride. It wasn't so much loss. It was more sense of achievement, and you don't really stop that often to reflect on that sense of achievement during the journey. And at the end, when you have the opportunity to do so, it can be a bit overwhelming. But it's always there. I said to my daughter, one of my daughters, at the time she was only 4, and I said, "Look, we've sold the Henry Jones," and she started crying. And then she said, "Oh, Daddy, will it still be there?"
Oh my God!
And I said, "Yeah, it'll be there forever." And then she was fine.
Yeah.
And that said to me, hang on, there's something in that. You've built it, it's there, people are still staying in it, enjoying it. I read the accolades it gets with a smile, and it's still there.
Wow. Now, I guess you went and did the big round the world trip, and then you've come back, and what are you doing?
Well, yeah, look, I wagged school for a little while, but I actually it came at a time when our family business had sold the Thrifty car rental franchise, which I was running as well, and that was 600 cars on the island, and I had a couple of hundred staff. We had a smash repair business. In fact, everything was sold around about the same time. So here I went from a family business and an investment in the Henry Jones to not a lot to do, but a fair bit of time to think, and I fell into consulting. I actually kept a little building behind the hotel, which I still own, and my private office is in that, and I have a number of clients that over a period of about 4 years I consulted to. I'm on a few boards, and it was liberating that you didn't have to worry about anything else other than yourself, but then you feel selfish because you're not worrying about anyone else other than yourself.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a cycle, and I enjoyed consulting because I was adding value to different businesses, predominantly in tourism, and did that for a while, and recently was asked to make a move to the Gold Coast to head up acquisitions of hotels for with another guy for the Mantra Group, which owns 114 properties.
You have gone in full circle. You've started an amazing hotel brand. Well, before that, you were doing some family business stuff, small business stuff. Start an amazing hotel brand. Go back into consulting, and now you're working for one of the big boys.
Yeah, well, I didn't think I would. In fact, I'd never worked for anyone in my life. Started my first business at 21, but I turned 40, and you can get a bit philosophical when you turn 40.
I'll give you a break. You're a chicken.
Yeah, well, that's what I convinced myself and said, if I don't move, I'd never lived outside of Tasmania.
Yeah.
If I don't do this now, and again, there's sort of moments in time that I reflect on what mentors said to me, and the guy that used to be the CEO of Tourism Tasmania said, Richard, do it now, otherwise you never will. And I did it, and the opportunity came up. I go back to Tasmania every few weeks to see my girls who live with their mother, and I'm just enjoying it. We've got a big brief. We've got 114 hotels in the group under 3 brands. There's Mantra, Peppers, and Break Free. And my job is to get more in the portfolio, predominantly in Asia Pacific. So it's a lot of fun.
Is that hard working for the man?
No, because I made damn sure that the culture here, the place I was going to go was the right one. I came up and saw the CEO, and he's a young CEO. He's ambitious, but a lot of fun. The team here they've got 4,000 staff in the group, and I'm in the team of sort of a dozen that are at the top of the sort of decision making environment. And when you're in that dynamic place, then I got the feeling pretty quickly. It goes back to this conversation about culture. I guess I weighed it up pretty quickly and said, I think this is a place I could be. And they've asked me to stay on, so we seem to like each other.
Good on you. Oh, Richard, it's a great story, mate. I'm so glad you were willing to share it, despite the fact that it's now 5 years since you've been part of the Henry Jones. It's a wonderful story, and listeners, you got to check this place out. Go to the website if you don't go to the actual place itself, because it is an absolute beautiful venue. It's a great example of branding and so many things. So thanks for sharing, Richard.
My pleasure, Tim. And look, I hope your listeners got something out of it. I'm a small business person at heart, and I know how tough it can be. We've talked about the success, but with that come a lot of hard times as well. And I don't want to sort of gild the lily too much, because it's bloody hard work. But
well, it's actually interesting you say that, because despite the fact that the interview is all but over, I was going to talk to you about, God, really, were there hard times? Because this just sounds like a rise and rise. But I guess there were, but maybe the hard times weren't as hard as others have experienced.
Well, I think the message in that is, I'm looking back now. So retrospectively, when you're in your business and you're cranking it and you're getting up early and you're doing the late nights, when it's all said and done, when you're sold and you've capitalised on your investment or whatever the motivation has been, when you reflect, you don't remember any of those hard times. I'll be honest. then those thoughts don't come in. It's the pride and the achievement, not so much in the financial side of it, but for me, job well done. And if that's what you can reflect on and smile, well, you have one.
I agree. Good on you, mate. Thanks so much, Richard.
Pleasure.
Wow. Honestly, I love all the interviews that I do. I love speaking to successful small business owners, but got to tell you, that one just kind of really resonated with me. I think it's such a wonderful story of business courage, of having a go, of brand, of just smart marketing. It ticked a lot of boxes. I hope you got as much from it as I did. Now, a number of learnings. Again, I'm going to keep it to 3, so many more, but number 1 for me, the identification of the brand pillars of your business. I loved how Richard talked about the pillars of the Henry Jones brand being art, history, design, and in fact the fellow Henry Jones who occupied that building all those decades ago. Being clear on your brand pillars can make it so much easier to therefore build your brand. They act like filters. So, and part of that whole branding thing that I loved in terms of what Richard shared was the black tie service with blue jean attitude. Again, that's just being absolutely crystal clear on the brand, okay? And when you know that as the owner of your business and share it with your staff, you're going to have this wonderful consistency. And you know what you're going to do? You're going to build emotion. A brand is simply an emotional attachment, and that's what you want to do in your business. Forget the rational stuff, build emotion. Number 2 learning from my fireside chat with Richard just reminded me of the power of public relations, PR, yeah? He used it so cleverly, and look at the leverage it got him, being on the number 1 travel TV show in Australia on Getaway, being in the New York Times, a half-page article. Oh my God, I would dream of that. If you want to pursue your PR strategy, I suggest heading over to a website called Source Bottle, SOURCE, bottle.com.au. The lovely Rebecca Derrington owns and runs that, of which I interviewed her a number of years ago on this show. It's a place where you can seek free PR for your business. Go and check it out. Number 3 lesson from Richard. We didn't go too deep into it, but a couple of times Richard mentioned mentors, the power of mentors. He talked about some advice he got from someone at Deloitte. He talked about his accountant, and I've got a feeling there were other people in Richard's life along the way that provided wonderful advice, sage advice. I like that word, sage. Been looking for a reason to use it. There, I've used it. And I think we all need mentors in our life. Hopefully this show for you, is kind of like a little mentorship in itself, albeit not one-on-one, but yeah, close enough. I'm just, I'm in your ear. I'm watching your back. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. That was just just a wonderful interview. Thank you, Richard. Thanks for listening, everyone, to that. Now, a couple of things before we go. Head over to the Small Business Big Marketing Forum. If you want to connect with me on a daily basis, if you've got marketing questions and all that, come on over and share them, and let's grow our businesses together. Head over to smallbusinessbigmarketing.com, click on the forum button, and you will be in before you can say, boy, wouldn't I love to stay at the Henry Jones Hotel. $49 a month, a little bit cheaper than the Henry Jones Hotel per night, but I suggest I'd love to see you in the forum. Number 2, remember to sign up at smallbusinessbigmarketing.com. There's going to be some free tickets given away to go to that Victorian Government event on August 29. We're going to organise a bit of a meet-up afterwards in Melbourne, so I'd love to see you there. But you know what? I reckon that'll do us. Remember, Net Registry make this show happen, so head over to them if you want any of your online marketing sorted. Until next time, team, may your marketing be the best marketing. See you next week.
You've been listening to the Small Business Big Marketing Show with Tim Reid. Want more marketing goodness? Then visit smallbusinessbigmarketing.com.